Thank you. And now time for the first panel of this year's edition. I am very pleased to announce the panel about European sovereignty and sovereignty in general. We talked a bit about this notion with Nicolas a moment ago. And now we're very pleased to have the 5 panelists and the panel moderator, which is Cesar Carmona, which I invite to come on stage. Please come on, Cesar, so you can take the lead and introduce this panel to our audience. Thank you so much. You were also here last year. It's a pleasure to have you back. And now you're moderating the panel.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mathieu. It's a pleasure to be here at CYSAT again, this time as a moderator. So I have the pleasure of introducing and moderating the first panel of this CYSAT. It's on an exciting topic, the role of cybersecurity in sovereign space assets and data. For this, we have an amazing set of panel members today that I will introduce in a moment. But first, I would like to make a small reflection. Well, first, an introduction about myself. So my name is Cesar Carmona. I am principal at Novaspace, the leading consulting firm in the space sector. And the reflection that I wanted to make is on the following terms. So when preparing for this session, 2 words came to my mind. So 2 words that were rarely spoken just a few years ago and that are nowadays all over the place, right? We hear them pretty much on a daily basis. The first one is tariffs. Do you like the way it sounds? Does it sound good to you? Probably not. The other one is, of course, sovereignty. It's a word that is even quite difficult to pronounce, at least for me as a non-native speaker. What does it really mean? What does it really entail? So what is quite clear is that in this context, cybersecurity, also cyber offense, let's be honest as well, and space assets and data play a key role. So when you look at the transatlantic alliance not going through the best days, when you see that we have a large-scale war in European territory going on for years, when you think about the oil conflict in the Middle East going through an unprecedented crisis, China threatening to invade Taiwan on a regular basis, Iran launching satellites with dubious payloads using ballistic missile technology. Even now, India and Pakistan are seeing an escalation also in a pretty old conflict. So, in these terms, so when you think about the announcement of the Italian government to use Starlink, when you hear the American government and also Elon Musk suggesting that they will cut service of Starlink in Ukraine, when we know about the difficulties of Iris Square, so a very challenging schedule, we just saw that, and also challenging discussions at industrial level. When you think about the European MODs, thinking about how and where to procure their space assets and data, the word sovereignty is all over the place. So where does Europe stand? Are our space assets secure and sovereign? What should our industry and operators do with respect to sovereignty? What should our governments do and the European Union? So to tackle all these questions and more, we have an outstanding set of panelists. I will introduce them in a moment. So please feel free to come to the stage. So they are Lionel Salmon, Director, Sovereign Cybersecurity Systems at Thales. Erin Miller, Executive Director at the Space ISAC. Alix Carmona, VP and Head of ADS Cyber. By the way, I must say, with regard to Alix, that we are not related, despite we sharing the same family name, but I used to work for her. We have also Paul Varela, Engineering Team Leader, Risk Analysis and Cyber at EUSPA, and Alberto Caponi, Head of Office, Security and IT Directory at ASI. Thanks a lot for being here, and a big round of applause. So before we start with the questions to our panel members, I would like to throw a question to you. And please feel free to use your app to answer. We will see the results of the poll before the Q&A session. So the question is very simple. Should Italy use Starlink? And the answers are A, yes, it rocks. B, no, they should use European providers such as OneWeb. And C, no, they should wait until IRIS² is operational. So please don't hesitate to answer to the questions, and we will look at the results later on. So we get started with the questions. So the first one is for Erin. Erin, thanks for being here today. So, Erin, you at the Space ISAC host a vast amount of cyber threat intelligence data, probably the largest one in a civil organization nowadays. So, in the space context, of course. So, given the strategic importance of space and the capabilities from certain state actors, what would be for you the most useful definition of sovereignty in the context of cyber for space?
Well, thank you very much for having me, and thank you, CYSAT, for hosting this panel, because this is an incredibly important yet challenging conversation to have. I would say that one of the key facets that we looked at when standing up the Space ISAC is sovereignty. And the reason why is because the individuals that live across the world, that are citizens of their respective nations, they are dependent upon space systems. And so because they're dependent on space systems, we had to look at what does that really mean? Who is really the owner and the operator of that critical infrastructure that they depend on? And it's predominantly the commercial sector. So across the world, as we all know, there are companies that own 90% of our space assets are owned by the commercial sector. And so our passion and our mission is to collectively protect global space systems to secure the future of humanity. And the way that we do that is by bringing together commercial companies to share threat and vulnerability information, not just cybersecurity threat information, but all threats and all hazards. Even most recently, the US Council on Foreign Relations has asked the Space ISAC to start sharing information related to space traffic awareness for launch and reentry. And they will use the Space ISAC as a vehicle for this global operational collaboration. So each country's sovereignty, in a way, depends on these commercial companies raising their security posture. The best way for them to raise their security posture is to have access to the most timely, actionable threat information, or have mechanisms for operational collaboration to deconflict before a launch, during a launch, and on-orbit attacks, multi-orbit interference, ground infrastructure security, all of the different aspects of security, their awareness of that timely, actionable threat information is what can create the mechanism for sovereign infrastructure.
But if you, let's imagine for a moment that you are the author of a dictionary and you open the book by the S, the letter S, and you look for sovereignty. What would be the definition that you would write on that dictionary, just for us to understand?
Control and ability to manage risk and understand dependencies. Without that critical knowledge of understanding the dependencies of our space systems and what they rely on internationally, the geopolitical dynamics and the interconnectedness, I think that is really where the bounds of sovereignty really start and end, is knowing the dependencies, being able to own your own risk, do your own risk assessment.
Thank you, Erin. So the next question is going to Paul. So Paul, you work at the EUSPA. EUSPA is a EU organization, therefore a civil organization. But today you're here representing the European Space ISAC, so which was created at this very event just 1 year ago. So the question would be, how can such a European knowledge hub support sovereignty in the space sector?
Thank you for the question, and again, also thank you for CYSAT for organizing this event and for hosting this panel. So as you said, this is an important event for us because the European Commission announced the creation of the EUSPA ISAC 2 years ago. Then we created it last year, and here we are 1 year later, also with more than 40 members and different working groups that are active. So, and it's really going in the same direction as what Erin just said, that it is important to have such knowledge hub to ensure that we have the different actors in the space domain, that they have their cyber resilience and their maturity increasing, meaning that we are facing more and more threats, and we have all the different news, all the threat landscapes showing us that space is a critical sector. It's not for nothing that now in NIS2, space is a critical sector. And we need to help all the different companies, all their size and all the different entities, public or private, to increase their maturity. So in terms of sovereignty, you were talking about what is the definition. I think it's important that we have control, but especially protection, and the word resilience, I think for me is important, that we ensure that the different companies working in this, that are making this sovereignty, meaning all the ecosystem, that they are supported to increase this resilience and cyber maturity.
Thank you so much. The next question would be for Alix. So Alix, Airbus is probably, and Airbus Defence and Space more specifically, is probably the only defense and space company with a truly European DNA. And you have presence in a lot of European countries. So coming back to the sovereignty concept, but giving it a European flair, so what does European sovereignty mean to you?
Thank you, Cesar, and nice to see you again today. Thank you also from my side for the invitation. Effectively, Airbus is a European sovereign company, being present both at national sovereign level and European. Taking a step back, I would say the European sovereignty in the space domain, it's about reliability and autonomy in space, being able to have access to space infrastructure, and IRIS² is a good example of that. I would say there are 3 to 4 key elements for us that we observe that are really critical for Europe to be autonomous and to be sovereign. The first one is the access to space, the launchers. And Airbus is involved in several type of launchers. So of course we have Ariane 6 now at European level. We have Vega, but also we have new companies like ESA Aerospace in Germany building new small launchers. So this is the first very important point, of course, to reach sovereignty. The second point I'd like to highlight are the EU standards. We need to have our own European standards, not to depend on other nations, other international standards. And for example, what Europe is currently developing as a European waveform, for example, is a good example of what Europe can do with a consortium of several industry working together to develop and set these standards. This will also go in the direction of more autonomy. The third point is European technologies. Of course, trying to replace non-European technologies by European and ITAR-free technologies, so that we don't need to ask about the use of the technologies. So these are, let's say, for me, the 3 main points to reach sovereignty. All that, of course, being dependent on our ability in Europe to attract and retain and form and train European talents. So that's also a key element we see today in all the panels and keynotes. We need some cyber experts, we need some space experts, we need experts having both knowledge, space and cyber. And this is a quite a specific knowledge and profile, so we need to invest in the training, and this is what we are doing also in Airbus. We have the chance to be present, to have a space business, to have a cyber business, and to combine these 2 activities to have really worldwide experts. And also recently we've acquired the company Infodas, for example, that is really a national expert in security, but also with EU and NATO certifications. So in order to have EU-wide products that are recognized coming from Europe, and this is the policy we are following in Airbus effectively.
How would you say Europe is preparing itself to become more resilient, more, let's say, sovereign in cyber resilience for space?
Europe is clearly now, or recently, has started to prepare more with typically the ReArm initiative 2030 in Europe that is starting to take shape. Of course, it has started before, and we see IRIS² and all the other initiatives Nicolas has presented before go in this direction. I believe it will go both on at a national sovereign level and at a European level together, investing also developing the local industries in all European countries. Of course, we have big groups like Airbus present in different countries, but we also have a lot of local small startups, very active, very innovative, that are interesting for the whole ecosystem in Europe. So we should definitely take the lead on that as well.
Thank you, Alex. Lionel, Thales, the company you work for, is a French champion on cyber and on secure communications. You have very strong ties with French national security. What does it mean to be sovereign on space cybersecurity technology for you?
So indeed, first, Thales is a French-rooted, but I mean, less than Airbus, but still we also have strong entities in several countries working in defense for their own countries, several European countries working for defense in their own countries or for sovereign cybersecurity. So I think we are also learning how to be sovereign in different countries and at European level, which is to a certain extent a challenge. Then coming to your question on sovereignty in the space domain, I think what it means, there are different levels of sovereignty when we talk about sovereignty. First, for me, what it means sovereignty is probably about, we talked resilience, etc. It's also about trust, mastering really what you put in your system. Obviously, you might have it at different levels. You might have a sovereignty at national level. You might have it at a European level, which is a growing topic. And it means typically again, mastering the technology you put into it, mastering your supply chain, applying to the right level of standard. What are the specificity of space, we might say, for sovereignty, or why is it important, sovereignty for cybersecurity in space? First, because as it was mentioned this morning, space is more and more critical in both for the daily life of citizens, navigation, communication, etc., but also for a lot of critical services, energy, governmental, etc. And also there are a lot of dual usages of space. For example, when we talk about navigation, Galileo, you obviously have the open services, but you also have a governmental, more protected services. When we talk about IRIS², as it was mentioned, it's both open light gov services for everyone, but also hard gov with a higher level of services. So it's more and more important also for space to apply to highest level of trust, of sovereign trust, sovereign cybersecurity, because it will face more and more threats, because it will face, as Nicolas mentioned, also a state-level threat. So it means IRIS², typically, it's not just hackers in their house trying to hack it, but it might be really state measures. And therefore, at European level, we really need to make sure we completely master the solution, meaning we are not relying on other countries if we want to use it over time, meaning we know exactly what is the level of security, how to maintain it over time, how to make it evolve. And yes, and the last maybe specificity of space and why sovereign cyber is important for space is it's also the fact that it's, I would say, a relatively specific market. For example, when we talk about onboard solution in the space, you have a lot of space specificities, and therefore, it's I would say it's sometimes even more difficult to be sovereign in that field. I would say it's easier for a country, MOD, for example, to fully master what they do for a Navy ship, vehicles, because they do it at scale, etc. For space, it's very specific. It relies on technology of a few actors, so it might be easier, I would say, to rely on a US solution, etc. But therefore, it's really a challenge also to say, okay, what do we need to develop and master specifically for the space domain versus where could we rely on external solution, but with which level of trust?
Okay, so we've heard the words control, trust, autonomy, mastery of technologies. So all these relate to sovereignty. So Alberto, what would be for you the most critical elements in the architecture of a sovereign satellite systems in terms of cybersecurity?
Thank you. So what I want to say is, first of all, it has been said also before from other panelists, cybersecurity is something that that is very invasive in a complex system, especially in space system, sovereign system. So it's something that we have to face in an holistic view, using an holistic view and considering it from really as a core requirements of space missions, especially when we are talking of sovereign space missions, and considering it not just as a technical and architectural feature, let's say. It should be a core concept that should follow and somehow also drive the mission evolution, the mission development. And from this point of view, I will consider like the most critical elements. It has been said also from Nicolas before, the supply chain. The supply chain is something that should be really protected. We have to know our supply chain. We have to trust operators in our supply chain. And we have to try to guarantee that we somehow are able to reach an independency from a technological point of view from non-EU countries and so on. The second point is the infrastructures. I mean, the ground infrastructure. We have to invest to understand and to protect ground infrastructure from a security and cybersecurity point of view. And in particular, we have to face problems like obsolescence. That is a critical problem in space infrastructure. We have to face it in a way that we introduce security by design concepts and especially zero trust concept, because we have very complex infrastructure interconnected with other systems and so on. The third point is the data protection. We have to take care of data. We have to be sure that all data that are involved in our space system emissions are protected from a CAA point of view, and like telecommands, payloads, data, and so on. And the third factor, the last factor is the human factor, let's say. We have to invest on people. And from this point of view, I mean, these are the main points I can say.
Okay, and the first one you mentioned is probably because it's the most important for you, supply chain. So do you think the Italian and the European supply chain and the industry have the technology and the competences to be at the highest level of security today?
Yes, I think we have some gaps. We have to invest to fill some gaps, but we have demonstration, we have the evidence that we are in the road to be prepared for it, I mean, in the supply chain. And from this point of view, I can say we have strong competencies in space engineering. We have also, especially in big companies, we have also competencies on cybersecurity. We have to make them to meet, and we have to invest on small corporates that are in space. From this point of view, also, Italy is pushing this kind of approach. because Italian space law is currently under discussion on it. And what was presented about the space law is somehow something that pushes companies, space operators to implement security measures into space missions and space systems.
You mentioned before there are some gaps. So on which areas would you encourage the industry to work on? Which are for you these gaps?
Mainly, I can return. The gaps are mainly related to what I said before. Maybe implement processes to make supply chain, to say, controllable in the sense that we have to know what we have in our supply chain. Also invest in what I said before, fill the gaps and in the sense that invest on people, training, awareness, and make space operators aware of cybersecurity matters. And also it is important, as we said before, development of frameworks, policies, frameworks that can somehow drive the secure implementation of systems and policies that can enforce security into systems.
Okay. Thank you so much, Alberto. Take the opportunity to remind all of you to answer the question that I formulated at the beginning. So please go ahead. In the meantime, I come back to Paul. Well, first, would you add anything to Alberto's reply?
In fact, I'm happy that we share one point with Alberto, which is the supply chain, because I think that it's an important point for sovereignty. As I was saying before, at the end, if you want to have sovereignty, you need also to have an ecosystem. And in the ecosystem, also what you want to protect, we talked about the technology, but also at the end, it's also the know-how. And when you talk about protecting the know-how, you need to think of what are the technical measures to ensure that you keep your knowledge, that you can use it also to be also competitive. Another point is you can have measures that are more at programmatic level, because we are engineers and we can think of technical measures, but also at program level. Sometimes we can think about acquisitions of companies. So this is also something that we need to think of when we are talking about also big programs. Where are the critical assets? Where is the critical know-how? How do we protect it, technically speaking, but also in terms of at programmatic level? How do we ensure that we'll maintain this competence to be sure so that we don't have dependencies on other, sometimes on EU technologies? So this, I think, it's important. And it brings also a difficult balance, because we're seeing that we need frameworks, we need to increase the resilience of the companies, but at the same time, we don't want to have an ecosystem which is not competitive, because we have too many layers of requirement, frameworks, and complexity. So it is a difficult balance to find between increasing the resilience and not adding too many elements, where at the end, the ecosystem will not be competitive, and we need to go back to other technologies that are maybe going against the sovereignty.
This is an interesting reflection. Do you think that there is somehow a risk of kind of a two-speed industry, in the sense the industry that works primarily for institutional, governmental customers, and that is purely focused on commercial activities from a cybersecurity perspective? So, because you mentioned about the frameworks, about not adding too much complexity and so on, would you say that there is kind of a risk of having like a two-speed road?
It's an interesting question, because especially now that we talk a lot about the new space, for example, we're saying that the ground segment could be a part where we have the most threats and vulnerabilities, also because the exposure and the surface of attack is bigger. We talk sometimes about ground segment as a service. So you were talking about two speeds. This is an example that when you have different companies sharing the same infrastructure that sometimes is not really secure, and because it's a newcomer in the market, the level of cyber maturity is not really high, then yes, they go fast, but at the same time, it's risky. But it's also bringing new technologies, so you need to find this trade-off, and this is why I think it's important that we have this kind of knowledge hub where basically a newcomer could come and say, where do I start? How can I improve my security, especially when we have a complex environment in terms of frameworks, baselines, requirements that we impose in our contracts. So yes, we need to be to evolve, to also to fill the gaps that we have that you mentioned, but at the same time we need to do it carefully and to not go too fast and increase at some point also the risk that we are facing.
Thank you, Paul. Erin, what is your take on the ongoing, let's say, growing geopolitical tensions that are, let's say, popping up between the two sides of the pond? So when it comes to the sharing of space, cyber threat intelligence, and cyber-related information that you deal with on a daily basis. So do you see any affection by the growing kind of tensions on both sides of the Atlantic at the moment?
Well, some people like to say that you got to take advantage of these opportunities, right? So there are companies that are at the border, they're at the edge, they have the sensors, and they know what the tactics, techniques, and procedures are of the adversary. There are also governments that have that information as well. So it's a pivotal moment that we actually use that to our advantage and think of the power of the commercial sector because they own the infrastructure, and Space ISAC has now over 100 members, and our members span across a number of different countries. We have an Australian global hub that we designated last year. We have a UK global hub. We are working on launching the Japan forum, which will lead to a global hub. And we have a number of companies that are EU-based and headquartered. So with all of those sensors and the knowledge base that's available out there, then we're heavily encouraging and actively collaborating through analyst working groups and analyst stand-ups where we actually ask every analyst to report in and share, what are you seeing today? Tell us what you can share with the community. And we have an information sharing portal that our members can also, at any time, 24/7, where they're working, where their company's investing in security, they can report that information in through an Intel submission is what it's called. So what we're seeing is over the last couple of years, a dramatic increase in companies' investment in security. Their security operations center, their network operations center, and their space operations centers, because they understand more of the risk. They see that, one, they can be helpful by contributing to collective defense, but also that their business depends on it. So the power of the commercial sector is there. They can make that investment, and the international space agencies that we collaborate with are encouraging this. We work with JAXA, UK Space Agency. We're working with the Australia Space Agency, Israel Space Agency, Greek Ministry of Digital Defense. There are many that I will miss. BSI is also a great partner of Space ISAC and the Canadians. So as we work together, then sharing this timely, actionable threat information is completely changing the game for these companies to be able to maintain the protection of their systems and their revenue stream.
How would you describe the collaboration between the Space ISAC and the European Space ISAC?
I'm so glad you asked. Well, today has been a remarkable day because we got to meet in person, right? Paul and I and Rodrigo and I have spoken today, and members of the EU Space ISAC. And whenever we get the chance to see each other in person, it's always a great opportunity. So I'm really looking forward to the next year. I think our ties will build closer and closer together. In particular, one thing that we're leaning on, well, I am, and I hope others are also, is the structured threat intelligence exchange, the opportunity that we have with that. Machine-to-machine threat intel sharing and agreeing on, as people have said, a framework and a standard for what we report as an indicator of compromise, indicator of attack, or indicator of behavior. To me, that's going to be critical for our partnership between the EU Space ISAC and Space ISAC.
Are you sensing by any of the organizations on the Space ISAC any reluctance to share information to the community on either side? So maybe the question is to both of you, to Erin and Paul.
Well, I'll go first. Just save you a little pain and suffering here, because this is the problem with ISACs, right? Everyone knows that you have to build trust, and it takes time to build trust. So in 2019, when we were asked to stand up the Space ISAC, then the very first question is anyone going to share anything, right? But as you asked the question, you know, what's happening with the geopolitical tensions and dynamics? Companies care. Companies realize their business relies on them sharing and having collective defense. They're investing in cybersecurity. So whether a government has made the investment to improve their defenses in space and cybersecurity, and they're determined to increase their sovereignty or not, a company still has to stay in business. They're still going to sell to wherever the market is. And so to me, then we're seeing a significant increase, and want to share that, you know, bidirectionally with the EU Space ISAC.
Do you share these views, Paul?
Yeah, to complement, I think indeed trust is the most complex element. Most of the time you share when you're in a good posture and good position. So when everything is running smoothly, you're secure, everything is going well, then you're able to share and promote what you are doing. When you are facing an incident, for example, then you're more reluctant to communicate. At least this is, I would say, a normal nature. So you need to build this trust. And also you need to say that people are not alone, and at some point, if you're willing to find some help, then you can find it in the same community. And this is why also it's important that the different knowledge, so the ISACs are not seen as a regular, or not controlled by a regulatory body that is here to monitor what people are doing. You have an incident, you should have reported it to me. So it is not the objective, is to help the different members, to help them in the reaction in terms of incident more, not to supervise the reaction, because this is a different body, but more to help and say, I had this incident, maybe you will have the same, because space is facing threats and attacks that are specific to space, but also that are transversals. When you are having a ransomware, for example, then it's for everyone. It's not only for the space sector. And this, you can ask other ISACs, also not only for space, but you can also ask for other communities. How do you react? Did you find any solution? So yes, this is the objective. But I think it's, yes, a difficulty to have this trust and to have everyone willing to share.
How's actually trust built in the context of organizations like ISACs? So is this coming from the top of the member organizations saying, hey, this company is trustworthy, let's share information, or no, is this coming more from the bottom up? How is trust built in this context? Question to both of you, actually.
Trust comes from intentional decision-making at the C-suite level, in my experience. So a company that CISO is empowered and their C-suite has made the decision to do active risk management and risk-based decision-making, then they're making an intentional decision to contribute to a collective defense mindset and approach. And trust now is passed on to employees because they're empowered to make decisions to share threat intelligence. A company will write a policy that allows them to do information sharing, and it's not dictated by any government. This is fully in the control of the C-suite of a company. So that's the internal trust factor of the company, is that they've made that intentional decision to manage risk, and this is one of the ways they're going to do it. Another factor would be the community coming together. So when we invite members and partners to work together, then we're only asking those with shared values. We have a pretty detailed vetting procedure to ensure that we're not inviting the adversary into the Space ISAC. And that's an intentional decision on our part, is to ensure that we're collaborating and cooperating across countries and companies with shared values. And that's why the Council on Foreign Relations, as I mentioned earlier, is willing to endorse and support the use of the Space ISAC for international collaboration.
Maybe one element to complement, I think is also what is important is the people that are participating with you to the different working groups or the ISAC, because at the end, when you're facing a problem, what you want is to have people having the same problem, more or less with the same position, for example, and not when you're exposing your problem to have 20 people coming with a new commercial solution. So it's important that you have people sharing the same issue, and then maybe they can point to you to a specific solution or product that help them. But this is also what we are really paying attention to, is not to be a commercial forum, but really a place where when you have an issue, you can come and you will have people having the same issue that will be able to help you and share their best practices with you.
Thank you to both of you. Lionel, back to you. So, well, you are involved in a lot of European projects, obviously, IRIS² being one of them. You are, I mean, neither Thales or Airbus are now part of the Space Rights Consortium, but actually both companies are still suppliers to it. So, but not only thinking about IRIS², but actually any kind of European project. So what is your strategy with respect to cyber supply chain in these kind of projects?
So it's true that when we talk about sovereign cybersecurity, historically, I would say each entity would tend to work with its own national ecosystem. But now I think we have learned for several years to work also at European level on sovereign cybersecurity. I think a good example, for example, is Galileo, because Galileo now it has been on for 20 years with, as we mentioned, it's a strong security requirement because it's a dual usage system, and it's really a European program. And now we have been used more and more to work with a European ecosystem on this, meaning working with, to name a few, I mean Leonardo, GMV, Indra, CGI, etc. So I think we know how to work also on sovereign security topics with entities from different countries and with their national entities. I think what's also good and pushing in this direction is all the advanced studies launched either by in the space domain, for example, by ESA, but now more and more also in the defense field. We have seen like the European Defence Fund with more and more money pushed for advanced studies where it's requiring industrial from different countries to work together, and also on sovereign cybersecurity. And so I think it's really something now that is that I would say we are used to it. We know how to do it. We are, I would say, more and more familiar with also the security requirements or the habilitation process in different countries. I would say still the point where we could push further when we talk about, I think it has been mentioned several times this morning, also small startups, etc. I think also in the field of cybersecurity and for space. And I think here it's, I would say, it's still an area where we are used to work with startups from the country where we are. For example, in Thales France with French startup, or Thales Germany with German startups, but working cross countries, like a large entity from one country with startups from another in the field of sovereign cybersecurity is still something we are less familiar because we, again, as we mentioned, it's a question of trust, etc. So it's something where I think for many large groups, it's still an area for improvement, really, so that we can move toward really a European ecosystem on this.
Can you and your company, obviously, in this context of European projects, ensure that you have a fully European supply chain? I mean, it's kind of
I think it depends what we call fully European, meaning some programs are really based on a kind of geo-return. So here you really have strong percentages on what needs to come from which country. But it's not, I would say, now the rule for large program. When we talk about Galileo and IRIS² at this stage, it's not, I would say, purely geo-return in the sense that, okay, each country has 15% stakes, etc. So I would say it's more qualitative. Still, there are requirements. For example, there are requirements for, I think it has been mentioned by Nicolas, for large group, for all contracts to open a certain share to external companies. And so what we, and I think now if you want to get position on large European program, I would say it's it's kind of a must to make sure you are not only from one country, you are at least embarking 2 or 3 countries. Then, so in that sense, yes, it's starting to be a European ecosystem. Here again, if I wanted to point to an area for me of improvement, is maybe for also to open to what I would say a smaller country or Eastern Europe, etc. I think now we are more and more used to have an ecosystem from the different large countries, France, Italy, Spain, Germany, Belgium, Netherlands. Now to make sure that we also embark partners from Poland, from Greece, from Scandinavia, etc. We are starting to do in some cases, but it's still probably an area of where we could push it further.
So in the context of geo-return imposed by ESA procurement rules, for example, so how do you build this trust on your supply chain? Is this something that you, as a typically prime contractor, impose on? So you say these are the requirements. You have to stick to this and this and these processes and this is way of working, or how? Because many times you might have to be involved with companies that you don't know very well, right? Because of this geo-return.
It's right. So it's both us having some rules, and indeed now Thales, but I guess all the large groups who have stronger and stronger rules in terms of supply chain, also on security, ensuring it, and also in a cross-country perspective. So yes, we have processes. I think when you talk about trust, it's also about knowing the local ecosystem and knowing which company is working for their national authorities, their national MOD, etc. So even if we don't know directly a company working for, I don't know, if we need to work with an Estonian company or etc. Maybe we have not worked with that company before, but if we know that this company is working already with for a European institution, for their MOD, and if they apply to the processes, I think it's a way also to build trust. And here again, if I take the example of some of the ESA advanced studies, that's also some of the European Defence Fund project, I think they have been very good way to get more and more familiar to work with companies, even in sovereign cybersecurity from smaller countries, understanding how they work. And I think now, even internally, we feel more confident to increase this type of collaboration.
Alix, back to you. So with the crucial role of space on society and Airbus providing all kinds of satellites, how is Airbus protecting its space assets from cyber attacks?
Yeah, effectively, we are involved in a lot of military space programs in all of our home countries. So we are investing and innovating on these topics. So I would say typically we would make sure the ComSec, the communication security is secured. So investing also in QKD or post-quantum cryptography. This is one aspect, but I think we've touched on it this morning. The transmission security as well is an important link to avoid denial of service of the satellite. We see more and more threats also on electronic warfare. And now more and more we put cameras for surveillance on our satellites to really monitor what's happening around the satellite, and also tempest to avoid electromagnetic activities. But I think there are two really new trends that we see in the way also we use satellites. The first one is that the satellites now are multi-usage, so really dual, where you have on the same satellite military payload and a civil payload, so what we call CondoSat satellite. And of course, in terms of security, it brings an additional challenge. You need to make sure you provide the right level of service to each customer, independence, autonomy of each payload, and bring segregation in terms of security. So this is where we are typically implementing onboard security gateways, for example, to separate really the two payloads. So that's one trend. Another trend we see is what we call the software-defined payload. So really the softwareization of the payloads, which brings a lot of agility in terms of flexibility to the customer, reprogrammability of the payload. But of course, it also brings a lot of challenge in terms of security. So Airbus here is really bringing a lot of software integrity checks, secure boots for our softwares to make sure we can really have this flexibility in terms of reprogrammability and in the software layer, let's say, of our system. So all very exciting new trends, but effectively bringing new security challenges, which we are addressing in various frame of our projects today.
Thank you, Alix. Alberto, back to you. So governments, armed forces demand more secure broadband communications, higher and higher resolution imagery. So do you think European companies can provide competitive services with regard to security? So can we provide, our companies, our industry, our operators provide highest security standards for the needs of our governments and institutions?
Well, it has been said also by Lionel. We have experience at European level of fruitful collaboration on Galileo. Galileo, it's a sovereign system developed by Europeans, EU, to limit the dependency on navigation from other countries. And it is an example of secure system that that demonstrates sovereignty and also developed by our companies. I believe also one thing, let's say, developing sovereignty systems is not the opposite of, it has been mentioned before, it's not the opposite of developing competencies, and also it does not mean you are not competitive. It makes competitiveness in some cases. You create competencies on your companies that is more secure awareness processes and so on. It makes companies responsible on security matter. On the other side, we have experience also, for example, in national programs. We have Cosmos Skymed for Earth observation. That is a dual-use system for military and civil usage. And it is a sovereign system developed by Italian companies. We have also, for SATCOM, experience with France for Athena Fidus, for example. It's another system in that sense. I mean, we have experience in Europe for these systems, and we can develop systems that are secure and demonstrates our sovereignty. Europe is going with the same approach to develop IRIS², to develop GovSatcom. And for example, in Italy, as I said before, we are developing a space law, Italian space law, that aims to promote Italian companies in the space sector and to ensure security in systems operated by Italian companies. And also in this sense, the government has committed Italian Space Agency to make a study for a national SATCOM constellation for communications instead. So we are working on it. We have the companies, we have the competencies at European level, Italian level, and so on.
Since you mentioned SATCOM constellation, well, it's obvious to everyone that access to cheap, reliable satellite communication, broadband communication is at our fingertips. So you can get now Starlink service with the terminal being for free, for instance, in many countries on low rates. So, and standards like 5G end-to-end coming more and more into the SATCOM scene, which also embed security features, right, that are integrated into the standards. So, what would be the arguments that you would use against your governments and against MODs and so on to tell them, yes, there are security measures implemented in these commercial services, but you need more than that. You need something more specific and you need something sovereign.
Well, let's say what we can say. I said we have experience on it. Let's say at national level, if we are talking a sovereignty system, of course we cannot investigate on commercial without taking care of integration of security in our systems. So it's in the process, let's say.
Thank you. Okay, so we have 5 minutes left. Let's have a quick look at the results of the poll. So if you can bring it up on the screen. So a massive 69% answered no, they should use European solutions like OneWeb instead of Starlink. There's 20% who answered no, they should wait until IRIS² is operational. And only 11% said yes, go for Starlink, it rocks, it's amazing, and it's cheap. So, and it's secure. Well, this I don't know. So let's comment on that. So maybe start by you, Lionel. So what do you think about the result?
No, I think it's interesting. I think indeed Starlink now is massively present for commercial usage, but I think for governmental we have to be aware, the recent months have shown it, that it's not always reliable if countries want to use it for their armed forces, etc. I think both in terms of, again, making sure you can use it whenever you want, and then making sure you know who can penetrate the system, etc. So for sure, I would have voted red or blue, I would say.
What about you, Paul? Being at EUSPA, future operator of IRIS².
I would say that we need to show this result to Nicolas, because then he will see that it's important that we have IRIS². So maybe we should say that yes, let's move to IRIS 100%. But of course, it's important to use a European solution. Then I understand the different numbers, and we just need to do our best to bring those systems in operation as soon as possible.
Alix, what about you? What do you think?
I would reflect that being sovereign is also very much a political or geopolitical decision, and it's often a hard decision. Sometimes it requires some compromise. Okay, then I will have the service maybe a bit later, or maybe a bit differently than what is already existing, and that's something we should not underestimate.
Erin, what about you?
Eutelsat OneWeb is a member of the Space ISAC. So I would pick them, absolutely. They're investing in cybersecurity, and they're reliable.
Thank you. Alberto.
Well,
what do you think about the result?
It's not an easy question. Anyway, something in newspaper. What I can say, I agree, it's something available, already available. The decision is not up to me. And as I said before, Italy is also, it's something that Italy at the moment cares at political level to understand how to have SATCOM capabilities. And as I said before, a study we started about national constellation that will probably, it can be a capability also for Europe. I don't know, but it's newspaper.
Thank you, Alberto. Thank you, everyone. So we have few seconds for questions from the audience. Please go ahead, don't be shy. Out of battery. Okay, I can see it on the screen. So, question from Gerd Villemos. How can we ensure that the future requirements for space data systems doesn't mean that all the small and innovative players in EU are seen as a risk and removed from the supply chain? Who wants to take this question? Any volunteers?
I think indeed it's a challenge. I think there are now some ways to at least to address it partially. For example, I think now more and more there are some de-risking studies launched by European institutions, etc., where you can grow up in maturity, and this is very open for small and innovative players, and that's a good way for, I would say, for large industrial to partner with small and innovative players, de-risk a technology, and then you can put it in the large program like, I don't know, Galileo, IRIS², Copernicus. I think it's true, it's a bit more difficult to enter directly if you have not been part of any of these first studies, etc., to enter directly in a system in operation.
Okay. Do you want to add something, Paul?
Just one thing, it's to complement what Lionel just said. I think the question is more, how do we help them to get on board? Because we have indeed major players, and also in many contracts we are saying that we need to have also smaller entities. So it's more in terms of how the ecosystem is onboarding those small players, also sometimes with new technologies, new ideas, while raising their level of security and resilience.
So, well, we're out of time. So we will close the panel here. Thank you so much to all of you for your contributions. Also, thank you for the audience for the participation. And yeah, thanks a lot.